This installation involves a DH163AT decoder in a Athearn Blue Box locomotive, specifically a GP40-2. We begin by removing the locomotive from the box, setting the box aside, and then removing the shell from the locomotive. This particular type of locomotive has 4 tabs that go down through the frame from the shell, and the shell is removed by squeezing the shell inward at this center point, wiggling the locomotive shell and the frame, and it will come apart. We then set the shell aside. After removing the shell, we then begin removing some parts that we will not use from the locomotive. We start with this top strap and simply slide it from underneath the L brackets on each one of the trucks and snapping it off of the top of the motor. You will not need this any longer, so we discard it. We're also going to need to shorten this particular electrical contact from the headlight, as we will not want it touching this flywheel once we install our decoder. Initially, we'll just bend it up and out of the way. The next thing we're going to do is to remove the motor from the frame, as we're going to have to electrically isolate the motor from the frame and attach the negative motor wire from the decoder to the bottom of the motor. We remove the motor by simply twisting the motor to the side, and the motor mounts will slip out of the bottom of the frame. Do the same for the other side, and we now have our motor out of the frame. Remove temporarily these 2 motor mounts, and we're going to remove this clip from the bottom of the motor, being careful that we do not allow the spring that it holds into the brush to get lost. We've now removed the DH163AT decoder and wire harness from the package and have it ready for installation. We're going to set the decoder itself aside. We are now going to remove the bottom brush clip off of the motor and replace it with the clip from the decoder package that is attached to the gray wire. This is your negative motor connection. We want to be careful when removing this clip, because there is a spring underneath that holds the brush next to the armature. I simply hold down with my finger and snap the clip up, remove the clip, making sure that the spring that holds the brush in is still intact. I then slip the clip over the bottom of the motor and snap it down. We next turn the motor over and do the same thing with the top brush clip. Again, being careful that we do not lose the spring. We remove the top clip, take the clip that is attached to the wire, the orange wire that is the motor positive, making sure our spring is intact, and insert the top brush clip by snapping it over the edge of the motor. We now have the two wires from the decoder's motor contacts to the motor itself. We are now ready to install the motor back in the frame. Notice that I've installed a small piece of tape on the frame that will insulate the motor from the frame to make sure that it is electrically isolated and will not harm the decoder. In this instance, I've used Kapton tape. However, any type of tape, including electrical tape or shiny Scotch type tape, is acceptable. After getting our drive shafts back in the flywheels, we line up the motor mounts over the holes and simply wiggle the motor until the motor mounts seat themselves in our 4 holes. Once the motor is reseated, our next step is to connect the red tabs or clips on the 2 right side track pickups coming from the trucks, the 2 trucks. Slide the clips over your brackets. And we have our right side track pickups connected. Then we connect our clip with the black wire to the bracket that is connected to the frame that goes up to the headlight. And we simply connect that bracket to the clip. We now have our track pickups. Our next step is to connect the clip with the white wire to the light connection on the back of the bulb itself. I like to take a pair of pliers and tighten the clips up so that we do have good contact. So we have our red or right track pickup our black or left track pickup, our orange and gray motor wires, and our headlight wire. We do not need to use any of the other wires on the wire harness. The blue wire is not necessary in this instance. You can simply wrap these wires up if you think you may need any of them in the future, or you can simply cut them off. Once you've just made that decision and either cut the wires off or wrap them up, you attach your decoder to the 9-pin plug on the wire harness. Place your decoder on the top of the locomotive and we have included small tie wrap that you can use to connect all of this and make a nice neat package of it, or you can simply use a piece of tape and run you a piece of tape over the motor and over the decoder to hold this all together. You will notice I have taped the decoder to the top of the motor, taken our tie wrap and tidied the wires up, cut the unused wires to a manageable length, and then we're now ready to install our shell back on the frame, making sure we get all the wires tucked in. We now place our completed locomotive on a test track, select address 3, and test to see how it runs and see if we can get a headlight and do the things that we want it to do. That concludes this installation video.